come up, so we will hand it over to the casters for the first match of the day. It's going to be the Tuskers versus End of Life.
Hello, I'm Rilo, joined with Jintan, and today we bring the Tuskers versus End of Life. And Tuskers are bringing a 2012 Redder, bringing dual Sleipnirs, dual Gilas, Bassi Ferox, and Mowers with some Manticores. Jin, what do End of Life have?
End of Life have brought a very classic Kingslayer composition there. 2 Fleet Typhoons and a regular Typhoon, but they've brought this kind of 80-15 spin that we've been seeing so much of. Those 2 Vexers, the incredibly cheap T1 cruisers, just to add more DPS and more utility than you possibly can with a frigate.
Absolutely. Since T1 cruisers are so cheap now, only 4 points, you get so much out of those T1 cruisers as a Vexer. End of Life bringing basically a 80-15 version of Kingslayer. All their Typhoons are fitting rapid heavies, got the Hyenas for those webs. I have a feeling this Bassi may die pretty quickly if he doesn't start running soon.
Yeah, the real question is, does Tuskers Co. even have to kill that Augurer, or even commit that heavily to it? So much DPS themselves. Those Sleipnirs, they look to be arty, but those Feroxes and those Mowers, by the looks of them, they're blaster fit.
Oh yeah, I have a feeling that these Mowers want to brawl in. Those Manticores are obviously going to have a lot of damage. 30 seconds left before the match starts. What do you think End of Life are going to actually prime first? I have a feeling it's going to be the Bassi.
Yeah, I can't help. I think if End of Life primaries anything but the Bassi, they're making a huge mistake here. The real question is, what are those Vexers and that Hound going to do in the interstitial period? When those Fleet Typhoons go and reload, we're going to have to watch them carefully and see what they start putting on various different targets in the Tuskers Co team. And here we go, match is starting.
Absolutely, and it does look like the Sleipnirs and the Gilas are all brawling in right now, and the End of Life team are trying to actually skirt around, trying to actually get the Bassi. So it looks like there's going to be tackle on these Fleet Typhoons really soon. Typhoon is starting to take damage now. He's going to be primary for the Tusker side, and he is actually melting pretty quickly. Webs, scrams getting spread out all over the both sides of the team, but that Typhoon is taking a lot of damage. That's a lot of damage being taken out of the End of Life time. Remember that triple battleship core, and he is down.
Down before the Basilisk even reaches half shields. That is brutal for the End of Life team. So much damage being applied to them so quickly. I have, those Mowers and that Ferox putting in huge amounts of work, just burning through him before they can even get a grapple down on this Basilisk. In fact, it looks like he's able to burn away. You can see there, Latronica's just living to win, having escaped the webs that originally got on him. He's going to be living for at least another 30 to 40 seconds, and that's probably going to give them enough time to kill Ruby Fruit in another Fleet Typhoon. Oh god, this is End of Life's team is just collapsing around them.
Absolutely, the End of Life tried to play Kingslayer, but they played it in a bit of a wrong direction. They need to go in for the Basilisk, and Basilisk is actually the slowest of the logic, so this should have been easier for them. Hyena for End of Life going down, and also End of Life also brought 2 Hyenas instead of the usual one that a normal Kingslayer would go. I mean, I don't know what happened here. The Hyenas tried to go in for the tackle, but they didn't tackle until it was at the end where the Typhoon was dead. Now, Bassi eventually going down now, but too late as all of their damage is dead. Bassi down, and the Fleet Typhoons are all down.
Look at the girth on that Tuskers attack bar. They are just forcing their way through End of Life's probably critical mass wormhole at this point. It is unreal how fast these ships are just dying. These Feroxes and Mowers just able to get in there, get on top of things, and apply just thousands of DPS.
Absolutely, those Sleipnirs and Gilas did what they did, and they brawled into those triple battleship core and just literally destroyed the Typhoon. Obviously, these Typhoons have those T1 resist, and against 2 Sleipnirs and 2 Gilas and a Ferox and 2 Mowers brawling at 0. That's a lot of damage, and obviously an Augur is only a T1 logistic ship, so he couldn't this triple battleship core that's supposed to be, headshotting. The Augur is only there to prolong the inevitable, basically, but, they traded 3 battleships for a Bassi.
Yeah, they practically couldn't even get their rep drones on top of that Fleet Typhoon before it died. That is, and obviously a critical part of the Kingslayer comp is that you have so many rep drones that you can keep your own ships alive during the whole of the fight. And with this
Absolutely.
amount of damage, and cheap damage at that, 4 points for a mower, that's like 1,000 DPS, and relatively tanky 1,000 DPS for 8 points. That's sub the cost of a single faction cruiser.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that match, the Tuskers go 100-17, only losing the Basilisk. And before we cut off to the studio, Waffles actually lost their Rabisu. They did actually have a Rabisu on the other match. It was Red Alliance versus Waffles, and Waffles lost their Rabisu to
So-
Red Alliance.
To give a little bit of information for the trap, the Rabiasu is a AT logistic ship. It's looking somewhere in the region of 200 billion ISK. So even if Waffles won or lost, I'm not sure which way that went just now, that is a hugely costly fight for Waffles. Let's send it back to the studio to break that down.
Absolutely.
Is a union of powerful mega corporations have brought its people both misery and triumph.
Well, we mentioned the Kingslayer style setup. Before that, Tuskers brought, they saw a more classical Kingslayer, then brought up against them and absolutely demolished it there with their Sleipnir guillotine. Beautifully played. They also brought interesting Moas. Moas, a ship that we don't generally see in the Alliance tournament outside, of course, the Valor Accords team, which obviously made top 16 last year. Do you think Valor Accords were perhaps predicting this year's play? Now we see that the Tuskers even bring in the Moas.
I think mowers do one thing very, very well, is with that innate shield resistance bonus and being 4 points, they bring a huge amount of like solid tackle that can survive under reps for a shield comp, where in armor comps you've got stuff like Daredevils or Vigilance that can stay alive. In shield, the mow is the king for something like cruiser size tackle, which I think is why you saw them being brought.
So everybody in chat may or may not be talking about a match that may or may not have happened. We're not going to spoil it on the desk now for those of you who haven't seen it yet. However, I can promise you, if you watch the Tuskers versus Red Alliance match, you are in for one cracker. We were watching it through over the shoulder of the commentator as it went through. We're not going to talk about that yet. Let's move on to the next match that's coming up in about 13 minutes. We have going to be playing Brave Collective versus Spectre Fleet Alliance. So two very large organizations there. Spectre Fleet, of course, being a huge MPSI group, probably the premier MPSI group. Now the RVB Ganked has been taken over by them as well. I've had the fortunate ability to FC Spectre Fleet a few times. And of course, Brave Collective, huge group historically in EVE. You know, they blew up when they took Catch and formed Hero Coalition. Then when they went to Fountain, got back small again through faction warfare and rebuilt themselves into once again a pretty reasonable null entity here. So their AT teams, however, are completely separate, as tends to be the case. Last year, Spectre Fleet favouring those hull tanked battleships going in their match all the way up through to where they lost to PL, then augmenting it with ECM when they went up against a Bandit Part, unfortunately losing out there. And then Brave Collective I've really been enjoying Brave Collective's tournament team. As I said yesterday, they kind of remind me of a younger test team where they've got this core of very dedicated pilots who bring out really good comps, who bring out really strong results, especially for such a young team with such young pilots in it. But it's really fantastic to watch them play, headed up by a CSM member, Yukiko Kami. I'm really excited to see what Brave bring. Do you guys have any thoughts about these teams or what you expect to see in the matches?
Well, I know personally that Brave spoke to people and reached out to start scrimming as early, I believe, as March. They wanted to start scrimming miles before the announcement and get that, so it shows the amount of dedication they have, the amount of work they've tried to put in. I really look forward to seeing them flying if what I believe is true and how much work they've actually put in.
Yeah, Suetonia?
Yeah, I definitely think Brave Collective are a very strong team this year. We saw them bring a very good comp. There was no flaws in it. They had all the ships that they needed, and I believe they bought that quad battlecruiser, but they bought the Tech 2 Balgon, and they still won with the Tech 2 Balgon because Brave don't have a flagship, which might actually cost them some future matches against top tier teams like Pandemic Legion. Spectre Fleet have also done quite well here. I think both Brave and Spectre, both strong mid-tier teams, definitely can make it into the top 16. If they play their cards right.
Yeah. So we have some beautiful graph stuff ready. The graph we're going to bring up in a moment is the graph of the sum bans of yesterday. So the bans of yesterday, that is the collection of all the ban choices for all the different teams over all of yesterday's matches. Likely ones to see being high or, oh, apparently we don't have that anymore. What graph can you give me? Apparently we haven't got anything at the moment, despite just being told we have tons of... Literally, I have loads of graphs. Apparently not, it is the case. Still, moving swiftly on, we are going to bring up... Not quite. Flagship day one, we have flagships brought or lost or died or something, who knows anymore. So we have 7 flagships fielded. Of those flagships that were fielded, 5 of them... those comps actually won their match, so 2 flagships were brought and then they still ended up losing the match, which you really don't expect, especially in flagship versus non-flagship. You expect the extra power they bring you to really kind of carry you through there. But then we also saw 2 flagships destroyed, so likely in those 2 matches that the flagships didn't win, those were the matches in which they were destroyed.
One of the matches, I remember, the flagship was lost, but the team won. It was a costly victory. It was something around about 10 bill for that flagship. And it was unfortunate, but it's a kind of a gamble you have to do when you bring a flagship to an arena.
I'm actually surprised that so few flagships have been fielded so far. Out of 32 matches, we have just under 1 every 5 games being bought, and I thought that would actually be higher, especially since as Hydra are about to experience the thrill of going through 8 best of 1s to get to the best of 3 brackets now.
Okay, let's bring up that one I just got in here now. This is the most contested picks and bans. So we've got the Aneros at 70% on the pick ban. We've got the Ishtar down there, the Scimitar. So 2 Lodgies, probably the 2 we consider them the best Lodgies out of 80 ships. The Aneros and the Scimitar generally being considered superior over the Guardian and the Basilisk. Suetonia, why is it that we consider them the local Lodgies, the Aneros and the Scimitar? Why are they better than the Guardian and the Basilisk in general?
They tend to have a lot more utility, and mobility is a lot more important in the tournament than on TQ. Also, the Basilisk and the Guardian, most people bring them in big fleets on Tranquility because of the energy transfers. You can cap chain them together, which tends to make them a bit stronger. They also tend to be a bit more tanky in general because they have slightly better resistance profiles.
Mm-hmm. Well, we also see here coming down just kind of a swathe of ships we saw in meta. We've got Bals there, we've got some Navy battlecruisers, both the Brutix and the Harpy pretty high, Blackbird, ECM, always a popular choice, more drone ships down into the Gila, into the shield setups. Obviously these bans are, apart from the Lodgies, perhaps targeted towards more armor setups. Now, armor setups have been showing pretty strong predominance this year, though we have seen a few comps, for example, the Rapid Lights coming through. The Tuskers game that we just saw also had a shield setup. Do you think that that's a sign for the future of the tournament? Is armor going to be king this year, or are we going to things switch and change, or could it go anywhere as the weekends go along?
I think consistently as you start to see the teams get better and we start to focus down onto like the 16 teams left or the 8 teams left, I think you'll see a lot more Shield, because Shield requires a certain idea going forward. It requires that you've got to know what to do with Shield compared to Armour due to how the ancillary reps work. So I think as the teams get better, we'll definitely see more Shield teams.
Yeah, so we have yet another graph coming at you guys here, starting off the day with lots of stats. We have the most primaries ships from day one. So the Neros obviously being a popular choice, so that's a headshot Logi, very strong choice. However, it is a bit of a double-edged blade. If you shoot the Logi and it doesn't die, and you've lost half your team in the process, then that's a big loss. But if you manage to headshot that Logi straight off, especially as it's not had time to pull range, then you're doing very, very well. We have the Daredevil down, natural pick, something quick you can get off the spot when you've still got all your volley, especially in those NBC teams. Nice, easy pick to lay out before the Logi's got everything locked. And then small ships coming across the Griffin, the Blackbird as well, typically not very well tanked, and a very important ship to get rid of. And then after that, we have, after the Harb Navy, we've got Manticore and Purifier, again, bombers, low tank, easy to get rid of, high DPS. And target calling in the AT often does follow target calling in EVE. You try and get rid of some combination of the ships that you can shoot at, the ships that are likely to die, and the ships have the greatest effect on you. So those are the Force Recons, those are the Stealth Bombers, and the Logis as the massive force multiplier there. After that, we've got the Armageddon and the Augurer. We have 5 minutes for the next match coming up, so we should be able to talk a little bit about what was going on in the other arena. That's the match that happened between Waffles, primarily formed by Snigwaffer, and Red Alliance. If you are currently watching that and we have got the time a little wrong, then spoilers for the next 30 seconds or so. Waffles did bring a flag bal with their Rabisu. They did win the match, but it was at a bit of a cost, wasn't it, Suetonia?
Yeah, about 150 billion cost.
I mean, 200 or more, I hear estimates of the Rabisu. It's up there with the Atana, really. Why is it that the Rabisu and the Atana are so expensive? Why are they so good for the tournament?
Well, first of all, you can use them to evade bans. For example, if someone bans Guardian the Nearest, you've got a Rabisu, you can still bring the Rabisu, then you can still bring armor, and that might also throw off your opponent if they don't expect you to have a Rabisu because they think you're now locked into shield. Really, you've got armor, and then you just crush them because you brought something they weren't expecting. Yeah,
we do actually have the kill mail of the Rabisu to bring up on stream for you guys now. This should, it claims that it only costs about 26 mil, but I promise you it's more like, something like 100 times that, however you get up to 200 bill from, so maybe 1,000 times that even. So we've got an ancillary wrap with 1,600 plates, so fairly reasonable big tank there. And then on the reps, you can just see how much rep this thing can output. 4 large reps and 1 medium remote with the Nosferatu on top as well. Obviously, it does get that Blood Raider bonus of the infinite Nos, so you can use that on allies, on ships with large amounts of cap to help keep yourself topped up, or you can use it on your opponents if something comes in to tackle you, Newt or Nos it off, and manage to run away. So as Suetonia was saying, the Atana, the Rabisu, they can evade those popular double Logi bans. Some of the most common ban choices we see in the AT, that's a Neros Guardian or Basilisk Scimitar to try and force you into a certain tank type, at which point you say, nope, I'm actually just going to bring a Rabisu or an Atana. Obviously, it costs you a lot of money, especially if you lose it, and acquiring them in the first place is extraordinarily difficult. Still, moving on, we have about 4 minutes before the next match coming up, so we should probably get back to talking about that. As we said, it's Brave Collective versus Spectre Fleet Alliance. Brett and Suetonia, starting with Brett, what are your picks for who's going to win this match?
I'm going to go with Brave. They've got a place close to my heart from when my early career, when I used to fly with them. I've done a lot of work with them quite a while ago, and I just love them to do well.
Suetonia?
I think I'm going to go with Brave too, but I think this is a very equal battle here. I think both of these teams are very strong mid-tier teams that can make it into the top 16, maybe even to the top 8 if they perform really well. So
Yep. According to you guys in the audience, it is currently 64 to 36% that it is going to be a Brave victory over Spectre Fleet Alliance, but we will have to see if that is proven right or wrong. As I said, we do have just a few more minutes. I'd love to be told in air, if possible, what the bans are for that match. Maybe we can discuss those. But before I hear that through, I'll let Suetonia tell us a little bit about his favourite matches from yesterday.
Well, I think the Hydra versus Templars match was really awesome because it showed Shield winning against an armor comp, and also one of the top contenders getting knocked out by a relatively unknown team. They have actually performed really well, Templars. They have performed in the EVNT. I believe they were in the minor league and they got promoted up to the major league, where they've been doing some impressive work against strong teams there. They also did quite well in the previous tournament as well.
Well, let's find out how Brave Spectre is going to end up as we go to match 2 of the day, Brave Collective versus Spectre Fleet Alliance.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and children